In this video I'm testing a Citroen Xantia diesel from the year 2000. This is the car that went head to head with the Ford Mondeo and the Vauxhall Cavalier stroke Vectra. But is it any good? Now before we get started, a quick thank you to the Ecclesbourne Valley Railway for letting me film in their car park. I'm looking forward to this car park filling up once they can start welcoming customers back. This Citroen Xantia belongs to my friend Jono, who runs Peak 2CV. It's his daily driver, and I'm particularly looking forward to this because I own a Citroen C5 that replaced the Xantia with the same engine, a 2-litre Hdi with 110 brake horsepower. But before we dig into this particular car, let's just talk quickly about Zantia history. The Xantia was launched in 1992. Officially the design was by Bertone, but I think it doesn't do enough credit to Citroen's own designers. They had very similar thoughts around it, a bit like the Citroen XM. It wasn't a pure Bertone effort. The PSA Design Bureau and the Citroen Design Bureaus had their own designs. They all shared a fairly similar theme, and the result was the Xantia. This is a facelift version, so it looked a bit different when launched in 1992, a bit more black trim, and a slightly neater, I would say, nose. I quite like the facelift nose, but it is a bit larger. Many engines could be had. I think there was a 1.6 or 1.8 litre petrol. There was a 1.9 non-turbo diesel, which could be specified with an automatic gearbox if you're really not a fan of acceleration. 1.9 turbo diesel, the old XUD engines, also available. Later on they moved to the direct injection Hdi engines with a common rail and more efficiency, a bit more power. So the 90 brake horsepower turbo diesel XUD engine, they had the 90 brake horsepower Hdi and a 110 with an intercooler. I don't think the 90 had an intercooler on it, but other petrol engines as well, including a V6, which sounds glorious. In my early days of the channel I tested a Xantia V6, well worth checking out just for the engine noise. It wasn't very well filmed. I was finding my feet back then. But like I say, this one has the turbo diesel engine, but there's also suspension options, free suspension options on the Xantia. There's the basic suspension that we have here, which is effectively just the old hydro pneumatic system from the BX, with a McPherson strut arrangement with a sphere on it instead of a coil spring, and trailing arms with spheres on the back. Just 4 spheres on these cars. There was the Hydractive 2 suspension, which introduced a centre sphere, which would be locked out if you started driving particularly quickly, would firm up the handling so the car doesn't wallow so much in the bends. Sadly not fitted to this example. And then there was the Activa, a car I'm still yet to put through my paces. A car with an even more complicated hydraulic system that actually cancels out body roll entirely. It still holds the world record for the elk test at 53 miles an hour. No other production car has ever come close. So a pretty impressive vehicle, really. Lots of options, lots of engines, lots of lots of diesels. There's so much choice with these cars. This one's got a manual gearbox. I think you could have the Hdi with an automatic as well, which would be quite pleasant. But importantly, you get a hydraulic clutch, because a problem with a lot of PSA, the parent company of Peugeot Citroen, or was until it became Stellantis last year, the right-hand drive with a cable clutch, always really horrible and heavy. But like I say, I own the C5, which is the replacement for the Xantia. I've skipped those. I've had loads of BXs. I've got a GSA. I seem to have skipped the Xantia, so let's go and see what I'm missing out on. So under there somewhere is the Hdi engine. It's a bit canted over to help keep the bonnet line down, but they're very proud of it. Look, Citroen Hdi, very happy about it. Over here we have the LHM reservoir. Unlike the C5, the Xantia still has this one master system that governs suspension, steering and brakes. The C5 moved to a conventional system for steering and brakes, but kept the hydraulic fluid, a different hydraulic fluid for the suspension. But yeah, green spheres, This one has comfort spheres fitted to the back, because one of the issues with these hydro pneumatic Citroens, the later ones, is the ride is a bit firm, because they tried to make it behave more like a conventional car, which kind of destroyed the unique selling point really. But most people got freaked out by the suspension, so they kind of made it a bit normal, and people fit comfort spheres to try and soften them back down again. So we'll see what that feels like out on the road. But yeah, there it is. Obviously cam belt change must be fun every 100,000 miles on these engines, I think. But yeah, that's an engine hiding under plastic. Moving inside, this is Jono's work car, so it's not in perfect condition, but a very 1990s seat upholstery going on. If we jump aboard, it's lots and lots of black plastic. We've got steering wheel buttons though for the stereo, so that's quite good. Wiper stalk over here, indicator as you might expect. We've got automatic air conditioning, so you can put it in auto mode, although you do have to turn the air conditioning aspect on yourself. Hazard lights, nice proper indicator noise, and it's interesting that it actually feels more spacious in here than the C5. Everything just seems a little bit further away, which is quite peculiar, given I think pretty sure the C5 is a bigger car. But typical sort of very comfortable driving position, huge windscreen, so a great view out. And yeah, we've got a glove box over here as well with some goodies like actual sat nav, proper old school. Twin airbags on this later one. But the build quality isn't superb on these. I've been in a few where there are trim creaks and rattles. We'll see how this one compares. Oh, we can have a look at Jono's music. Green by REM, that's quality. Ash Nuclear Sounds. They were a good band a long time ago. And David Bowie, okay, fair enough. Hard to criticise a man's music when it contains such wondrous stuff as that. There's lots of interior lights, look, all over the place. And this is a fairly lowly spec. I think this is an LX. So we've got electric front windows with an automatic function, and power steering, central locking, and a clock. So yeah, all mod cons. Gear change, it's a little bit rubbery, but doesn't feel too bad. Handbrake operates on the front wheels, and then we've got the lever to control the suspension. Xantia has always had massive doors on the back, which must be fun in a car park situation. They're absolutely huge, but it does mean getting in is quite an easy process. And plenty of leg room here. I've got Haynes manual just in case of breakdowns. Headroom is a little tight, would be better in the Estate, which came a couple of years after the hatchback. But yeah, they've tried to scoop into it, but nonetheless my head is actually touching the roof. There's not quite enough there. Centre armrest to pull down. Obligatory ski hatch. These were definitely the rage in the 1990s. Also enables you to grab snacks from the boot. And of course a folding rear seat to free up space. But let's go and have a look in the boot itself. Taking the load space in, we push the button and lift. And we've got the elastic somewhat gone in the parcel shelf, but a very useful space here, full of ratchet straps. Cheers for tidying up, Jono, that was very good of you. It's not like we agreed that I was going to do this test or anything, but that's what friends are for, I suppose. But yeah, you could get several people in there, I suspect. I might put Jono in there later. Right, well, let's get the old girl started up. Very smooth, very good sound insulation. But we must do a windscreen wiper test, and my t-shirt is apt. Look at that. This awful passenger wiper design leads to a massive triangle of doom. T-shirts available at hubnut.org, and that's why those t-shirts are available. It inevitably leads to this dribble, which is not good news for anybody. So that's a terrible design. I think he said the rear washer doesn't work, unfortunately, and we find ourselves on a really hot day here in Derbyshire. So we'll head out and see what it's like. Just adjust the seat slightly. Jono's legs have grown since I last saw him. I was still dribbling. See, the dribble just drives me mad from the triangle of doom. We should drive out One of the volunteers on the railway has a delightful Morris Minor, which is currently people are enjoying looking at. Very nice. So it's one of the lesser known railways. This is well worth checking out. But driving over the car park already, over this uneven terrain, it just feels so soft and comfortable. Straight into hill climbing, because we're in the Peak District and there are hills aplenty, but very good diesel engine. It pulls very well from very low revs. We're doing about 1500 revs up a hill, and it's fine. It's nice and relaxing. The previous generation of turbo diesels, the XUDT, the turbo generally didn't come in until about 2000 revs, so you had real hard work to try and keep those in their power band. So the HDI was a step forward there. Does feel a fairly large car, but oh, it does seem to pick up nicely. My C5 doesn't feel quite so nimble, but I want to check the gearing and see if that's where the difference is, because in terms of weight, the C5 is only about 50 or 60 kilograms more. But I can feel how floated the back is, because the back actually sinks under acceleration. But the ride is very comfortable as a result. I don't know why I'm revving the engine. You really don't need to rev these engines. You can just use the torque and make surprisingly swift progress without feeling like you're trying. Oh yeah, there we go. This road quite uneven. I can feel the suspension at work. Very, very good brakes, of course. Although again, they dumbed down the pedal response because of criticism. People found the brakes too fierce. That was back in the BX days. So while the brakes are supremely powerful, you do have to shove them a bit more than an earlier hydro pneumatic Citroen. Remember the DS? You got a little rubber button on the floor. Very, very peculiar. So these have a conventional pedal, sort of dumbed down to behave more like a conventional car of the time. These days, again, everything's over servoed and stops on a sixpence if you breathe on the pedal, which is ironic because Citroen were doing that in the 1950s. But very good handling, very agile cars. The French, the absolute masters of ride and handling. But the strut suspension can get caught out from time to time. They don't like potholes, so they can crash a bit. It's almost like it can't respond quickly enough. And there's a very good question mark over whether the Xantia actually gives you anything over, say, a Peugeot 406, which uses the same platform but with conventional suspension. But you know, those Peugeot engineers were superb. So you got ride and handling seemingly uncompromised, but with none of the complication of the hydro pneumatics. I mean, for us Citroen fans, it's got to be hydro, just because we like weird suspension and we like the self-leveling. But the car won't squat, being a later Xantia. It was only the really early Xantias that squatted down when you turn them off. These have anti-sync suspension, because again, people just found it a bit annoying. Start the engine, wait for the hydraulics to pump the car up before you can drive off. Bank robbers found it an absolute nightmare. So they ditched that and fitted anti-sync valves that hold the pressure and keep the car up. That's nice. I can just hear a random relay clicking away. That's quite French. But yeah, it's just an effortless, comfortable car to drive. They really are nice. Never been particularly convinced by the petrol engines other than the V6 when it comes to the Xantia. And annoyingly, in the UK, the Activa was only available with a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo engine, a sort of a low pressure turbo, but they're not very economical, so you might as well have a V6. A few people have built their own V6 Zantia Activas, because you can get them like that in Europe, but not in the UK. But yeah, large windows all round, very low waist, so visibility is excellent. Got 167,000 miles on it, this car as well, so it's not like it's in the first flush of youth. And I must concede that there's not much in the way of trim rattles in here. It actually feels like it's built to a good quality. So by the year 2000, when this one was built, the Xantia was getting quite long in the tooth. They killed off the Citroen XM that year, And so there was a Xantia exclusive, a top spec luxury model to try and make up for that, because they didn't replace the XM for some time. Eventually there was the C6, but that came along several years later. So the Xantia was forced to try and be a replacement for its sister car. And in that regard, not quite there. The XM just has a special sort of a space age feel. So really there's a big advantage to these later Xantias over the BXs. But it was the Xantia that really saw the jump from the BX. The BX was a large car in its class, but it was down at the sort of small family car segment in terms of price. The Xantia is firmly in the larger car class. So whereas the BX was a rival for cars like the Vauxhall Astra, the Ford Escort, the Xantia very much in the Cavalier stroke Vectra and Mondeo class. There was a bit of overlap between Cavalier and Vectra during this time, and I think the French Beauty triumphs over both of those. It's a bit closer with the Mondeo. The Mondeo also launched in 1992, and I think both cars really moved on that market sector. I mean, personally, I'm always going to be drawn to the Citroen over a Ford. Not to dismiss the Ford too lightly. The Ford Mondeo was a great car, very well developed, but just think about Citroens. The handling just seems that little bit sharper. Yeah, even the non-hydractive Xantias handle well. Increasingly, I'm not sure whether hydractive suspension actually gives you that much advantage in the real world. I think it's a very clever way of achieving not much more when the base car handles so well already. The Activa was a massive step, very clever suspension, and an idea also used by Land Rover on the Discovery 2. Mercedes-Benz also had a roll cancelling suspension system, so it inspired other companies to follow. Yeah, very tall gearing again, making use of that extra torque. So 60, we're doing below 2000 revs. It's just a very nice driving experience. I can really feel the car floating over these surfaces. Let's get the old thump as we hit a bump, and that strut suspension just slightly compromised. Doesn't quite manage to drown it out. It's not a magic carpet ride like the earlier hydro pneumatic Citroens. Yeah, there's grip aplenty. You can have real confidence in it. It doesn't seem to roll around too much. These are great cars. It's enough performance. It does definitely feel a bit more sprightly than my own C5. A bit less weight, maybe that's making the difference. But mid-range shove, the rise of the turbo diesel is precisely because of that. It's not just the economy. When it comes to driving experience on a daily basis, that mid-range turbocharged driven shove is very, very addictive. It makes for a more relaxing driving experience. So yeah, I don't know why you'd go for a petrol, frankly. I think these diesel engines are great. And in terms of economy, from my own C5 experience so far, I'm getting mid-50s MPG, which for a big old family car like this is not bad at all. Oh, listen to that. That's actually quite a nice diesel noise as diesel noises go. So I shall say, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this road test of a Citroen Xantia. Don't forget to check out the Hub Notes channel, where you can find some behind the scenes footage of what's been going on with these tests and my own cars. And I shall see you in a future video. Farewell! That's all right, mate. You just pull out in front of me without even looking. That's great.